lost my signal. What happened? Is Eric going to lose his video?
Man, I'm so tired.
Me too.
There we go. Okay. Alright, guys, we're live.
And welcome into Indian Time, Muskogee Media's daily live stream that we have up for our citizens to keep you up to date and up to speed with all of the news that happens as it happens here at Muskogee Creek Nation. Myself, Jason Salzman, the interim manager here at Muskogee Media, along with media coordinator Jessica McBride. And Jessica, just as we most of the time do on these Indian Time segments, we start off with a lot of things happening, specifically with the National Council this week. Yesterday, holding a Health, Education, and Wellness Committee meeting, otherwise known as HEW. We refer to it as HEW many times before, and people should know that means the Health, Education, Wellness Committee. A committee of 4 folks, right? And they had some business to attend to yesterday. You actually got to sit in on the meeting. Tell us a little bit about some of the highlights.
Well, they actually had 3 different committee meetings yesterday.
Okay.
The HEW committee met, and then there was a joint meeting between HEW and the Land, Natural Resources, and Cultural Preservation Committee, also known as LNC. And then LNC had their own meeting yesterday evening as well. In the HEW committee meeting yesterday, they had 2 cabinet members that were reviewed. Most of the time, these have been reviewed in executive session that we've seen this year. But in this meeting, they were actually reviewed in public forum. So if citizens are interested and want to hear those interviews, the audio is actually available on the National Council's website.
Oh, yeah. And you can go and visit that. You got it up here. Jared, can we get that screen up real quick and show them where we can do that at?
So you won't be able to have video on this, but if you go to www.mcnnc.com, and then on the left-hand side on the council menu, there is an item called Audio Committee Meetings, and you'll click on that.
Usually it's a listing of which community, there you see HEW, you see the dates, and you just find your correlating date, really, right, Jessica?
Right, and so you're going to scroll down until you get to the April 11th, 2016 dates. There's actually 4 recordings from yesterday, 1 from LNC, 2 from the LNC HEW committee, which means that they went into executive session, and so that portion they won't have recorded, and then the final one is from the HEW committee.
And of course, executive session, they go in, nobody allowed in but council members, and so we're really not allowed to report on that. Not even citizens can stay in on those meetings. So, you see lots of work being done there. Another thing I want to point out is don't be discouraged by maybe thinking, oh, it's probably bad quality. This is good quality audio. They've got some good mics over there, and you can really hear well. We even were able to publish audio that had people not at the actual mic'd table,
Right.
that were there to answer questions, the health board, and you could hear them well enough to get quotes and things like that. So it's a good resource. It's a great thing to have there on the council site. And what better way to be informed than hear the actual meeting? You can hear us tell you what happened all day long until we're blue in the face, but really, if you go on there, you can listen to it for yourself. And so lots there. I think what was interesting for this one, a lot of people still stay with us, Muskogee Media, from our big housing story back before the end of the last year. New housing director, basically acting housing director, up for consideration in front of the council. Alvin Bucktrott, and he was able to go in front of the Hugh Committee this time.
And he had a lot of different things to say. His interview is actually fairly lengthy, so the majority of the session is his interview.
Right.
A couple of things that he brought up that he's encountered. He's only
Very
been
interesting
acting.
things.
Yeah, he's only been acting for 30 days. And in the last 30 days, what he's found is that they haven't necessarily followed policy and procedure set out by the housing department. And so that was an item that was discussed heavily, and what they thought that, or what he thought he could do about it. One of the items of interest was that recipients of homes weren't necessarily making their payments.
Right, and I think one of his claims were that he had seen instances where maybe for up to 4 years they had been making a house payment. That's definitely in violation of the policy, something that probably other, on-time, responsible paying Muskogee Creek Nation housing clients would like to know, or, what the secret, recipe is to not having to pay your mortgage. But that's definitely something that is alarming. What was the sense of the reaction in the room when he's saying things like this?
One of the things that he brought up was that he said he is a by-the-book person, and so he wants to abide by policy and procedure, and when policy and procedure needs a workaround, then they need to change policy and procedure. One of the other things he said was that he wanted to make those changes, and that people may not necessarily like him for it.
Right.
And so there may be angry citizens calling council, is what he said.
Maybe unpopular choices and decisions you have to make. That's with anything. I mean,
he passed through the committee. Now, the committee's made up of 5 members, but only 4 vote.
4 vote, yeah.
So he passed through committee 3-1. With Representative Rufus Scott voting against him.
Did Rufus say anything about his dissenting vote?
I don't remember that he
no
did.
Explanation.
No.
Oh, okay. What about Mr. Bucktrott? He said there's policies and procedures broken. He said there's people that haven't paid rent in 4 years or haven't paid their home payment in 4 years. Does he have any evidence of these things?
It's interesting to find out what evidence he might have, if he's actually looking through files, or if this is just hearsay that he's being told by employees. He doesn't really clarify.
Okay.
But one of the things that Representative Scott did bring up was people illegally obtaining houses and what he planned on doing about it. And Mr. Bucktrott said that he would look into those cases and then advise the tribe on what they should do. On
cases that have already been referenced and brought up, even
Correct.
in our coverage?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, we knew, when we started the housing story that it would be something that was probably going to be a living document, sort of changing and developing as time went on. And we let everybody out there know that we would continue to follow it, and we would continue to report as we saw fit and as we had things come in. This is an example of that. This is basically that coming into fruition, the fact that we're still talking about that now. We're still having elected officials have conversations on it now and bring things to light that we didn't even cover then. So, there's layers to this story, much like there's layers to the health deficit story, which is why you're seeing us concentrate on it so much. I think people come on to Indian Time, they come onto the website, and you get a segment of citizens that says, well, geez, it's like the sky is falling. There's so much negativity. There's so many stories dealing with tough subjects, tough things to look at. But these are things that are, they really move the news dial. And I don't mean that to say they bring us in viewers, because we don't care about, making headlines and getting big ad dollars. We care about Creek Nation citizens being informed and having what's going on in their nation straight from the statistics, the facts, the documents.
Right.
So for us, it's just a big story. It's not that we're wanting it to push it, but you go by what the citizens want to know. Yeah, and right now, the citizens want to know what's going on with their health department, what's going on with their housing division, who these people are that are being put in the executive offices. We're letting that dictate the coverage right now. But there are also some things that we have been doing. If you'll watch, here comes the shameless plug. If you'll watch Native News Today this weekend, we've got a lot of good human interest, stories in there, some fluff pieces, things like that you would call. One of which is the canoe. I don't know if you've gotten a chance to go over and see it.
I haven't. What was going on today?
Well, back in a few months ago, back in the wintertime, whenever we had done the initial story on it, and I don't know if we've got that. We'll have that on the show this weekend. But when we did the initial, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say we do have.
I'd pull it up on here.
On the email.
Yeah.
You can pull up the flyer for the
yes.
thing.
Go
I
ahead
think
and
that
do
gives the times of when
Yeah.
have for the public.
So what happened was in last winter and really last fall, sort of, and this was back when current Secretary of Interior Affairs Christopher Asbell was working in the department, the Cultural Center and Archives Department here at Muskogee Creek Nation. They had an idea to basically go to Alabama, to our homelands, the area just around Horseshoe Bend, very creek in nature, just everything about it, and had an idea to take a poplar log from the forest there, cut it, bring it back to Oklahoma, and take a dugout canoe out of that log to be put on display here at Muskogee Creek Nation for citizens to look at, transportation. One of our main transportation avenues back in the primitive days of our tribe. There's so much history there as you look and seeing how many were made, how big they were, things like that. But anyway, they had an idea to make one of these, put it on display, bring it back here, and now that was back in wintertime. I can't remember the exact date to tell you and point you toward that first dugout canoe story. That's when we talked about them.
Close to after festival.
Might have been a little bit after festival, maybe a month or two after festival. Yeah. But we talked with them about the decision and really bringing the canoe. And so that first time we talked with them, it was about actually digging it out and actually curing it, getting it dry. The piece of wood that they got, the poplar log, was very, very wet. So that was all about drying. Now they've brought it back for the finishing touches. And as you can see, Jessica scrolling here, there's the look at it in a little bit of an earlier stage. Now they've fully got it dug out and they're putting the finishing touches on it. They'll fire it one more time just to get all of the wetness out of the log. And then what I thought was cool, we talked to John Brown today, who actually, John, took over basically the operation of Chugatoxi Shajalgi, which is our bow shooter society, from Mike Berryhill. Now, what John told me today, which I thought was so cool, I hadn't heard this before, this dugout canoe was actually Mike's idea. I mean, Mike is the one that wanted this to happen. So he's since passed on. It's something that John has basically pulled up his bootstraps and went to work on himself on this deal, getting it finished. We talked with John today. They're going to put this thing in the water. I mean, it's not going to just be this, let's put it on display and it's this artifact and relic and museum piece. They're going to actually, that was one of the things Mike wanted. Mike was like, don't just make it and paint it up and put it in a museum or something like that. He was like, I want to see this thing float. I want it to go in the water. That's the main thing. So it's going to go in the water.
Now they did this without any technology. This is man-made. Correct?
Oh yeah, well it's man-made. I mean, that's one of the things that John said too. Of course they use some things that our people in before contact definitely didn't have the ability to use, such as chainsaws and things like that. But it's for the most part, it's not a big send it off to a factory or a sawmill or something like that. No, these guys are cutting into this and curing the wood, drying it out, firing it, much like, just a few different, modern tools here and there, but for the most part, yeah, man-made and really neat. And I can't wait for everybody to see not only the last time they visited, but this week as we sort of go through the construction of it with them. That's going to be really neat to see then and now. And it's actually, I think, going to be out there. They're working on it all week long right now. And if you go out, it started yesterday, of course, Monday, but going to this Friday the 15th, 8 to 5 every day at the Claude Cox Omniplex. You can go out and check it out. And it's basically going to be going on like a regular work week, only they'll be actually finishing up, putting the finishing touches on the log. Butch Fuller from Alexander City, Alabama is going to be out there. He's the woodworking specialist that's been working with them. The Bow Shooter Society played an integral role. And it's all basically under the umbrella of the Cultural Center and Archives Department. You can call them at 918-549-2434 if you want any more information on the dugout. The dugout canoe project and everything that's going on with it. So it's pretty cool.
That's pretty awesome. Are you going to go back out on Friday?
I'll probably go back out and definitely get footage of them putting it in the water and things like that. I might even get in the log. They might let me do that. I mean,
that'd be awesome.
Get in the canoe.
Wear the GoPro.
Well, I will wear the GoPro proudly. And yeah, did you see the guy in the canoe though that thought he was pulling up a catfish on the noodle and it was an alligator? Yeah, so
don't do that.
Don't do that. Yeah. Well, the guys that I'm a fisherman, big time fisherman. Everybody knows this that knows me, and go all the time and all about catching a fish. I've seen these guys here lately, and even one of my good fishing buddies, Big Jim, James Williams, does a great job in our arbor care department actually. But Jim, he's one of these guys that have fallen into it too. The whole canoe thing. We got a bunch of guys out in kayaks fishing now, and I'm just like, what if you catch what if you catch something big? It's gonna set it in there with you, whatever. I just don't see it, but maybe I don't know. If you're just catching crappie or something like that, you can keep a little stringer off the back of it or something like that. But I don't know. I want to go catch big catfish. So no room for me and a big old catfish in a kayak. Can't happen. So I told those guys though I might bring my fishing pole on Friday. If they're going to bring it out, they're going to bring the canoe out right. Let's do it right. And our people fished, so they didn't just use it to get from point A to point B. So lots going on too around here. Not only with the dugout canoe, but as we said, the lots of committee meetings happening this week. Anything else that highlight from the...
Well, Alvin Bucktrot and Greg Anderson. Greg Anderson is the nomination for the Education and Training department. And both of those, he was approved 4-0, so got all the votes from the committee. Both of those will go before full council here at the end of the month.
Greg, a friend of mine, worked both nationally and locally with Indian education for years. And for many years was director of the Eufaula Dormitory. So.
Well, one of the other things that happened in the Hugh Committee yesterday, we kind of touched on when we got the agenda for the Hugh Committee that there was a proposal to have a committee review the electoral process.
Yes.
And so yesterday, Chief spoke on what the ideas were for the committee, and then the election board also spoke. They brought their attorney along to the committee meeting. And they said that they weren't necessarily consulted on this piece of legislation, and they had scheduled a meeting with Chief yesterday evening. And so we're going to be reaching out to Chief to find out what went on in that meeting. But that piece of legislation has been postponed until May. So
it's a little unique. You don't usually see people bring attorneys or representation to a committee meeting.
Right. And what this legislation kind of, just to summarize it a little bit, I know we did previously last week, but what this would do was it would have several representatives nominated by the council and the principal chief, as well as one person from the Carter Center, and they would just go over policy, procedure, and the electoral process to see if there's any recommendations they could make.
Yeah. Well, we've had citizen concern with our election processes for several years, not just this last election. It wasn't just to confined to this last election or the one before, or even the one before. It's always been something that the citizens have been had their eye on, and thought, how are we doing with the election board and election board representatives? People come and go, so you just want to make sure there's some consistency there and all that.
Well, we've heard some disturbing claims too
Yeah.
that haven't been substantiated, but they're out there about dead citizens voting, etc., etc.
Well, I think that was brought forth in a meeting.
It was
right?
brought forth
on
recently
record
in
a council meeting.
in a committee meeting
Yeah.
about
Right.
the potential for dead citizens voting, and that's why the citizenship board wanted some new tools so that they could update the
Right.
deceased
Yeah,
list.
and so
Yeah.
but that's one of the interesting things
Which-
about this is the legislation is strictly to observe the electoral process and then give recommendations after the observation for the election board to show up at the committee meeting, like we were saying, with legal representation speaking for them. That's a bit strange.
Yeah, and I mean, the most disturbing thing is we still got bad voter numbers, and we got dead people voting. Apparently, it's like I mean, what would the numbers look like if there weren't doctored like people voting that weren't legit registered or whatever? I'm just saying that's something that. I mean, every year we have an election. What's the thing we say afterwards and before?
Yeah.
Oh man, we don't have that many people
Yeah,
voting.
we need to
We
have
got to get
turnout.
out and vote. I don't know what it's going to take to turn that
Well,
tide.
part of it is these type of things where we have an observation and find out where the flaws in the system are, because that's what's really disenfranchising a lot of citizens from voting anywhere. Is if they think that the system isn't working properly,
Right.
or there's corruption in it,
Yeah.
they're not going to participate because they're going to say it's a rigged system.
Yeah, you hear so many people. It doesn't matter who's in there; they're going to do the same thing.
Yeah.
Hey,
So-
that's certainly you're right within the system. But as far as I would say, you can make it much more. You can make it much more loud. Your voice as a citizen if you take part in it, and vote. I think so. I'll never discourage
Well,
anybody to vote, but I can see people that get a little bit
The
disenfranchised.
council members that are spearheading things, and the fact that this is going through the legislative process now, I think it is evidence of the most recent elections and what constituents were telling the people that were running for these positions that they wanted to see happen.
Yeah,
And this was a pretty big issue for a lot of people. So they're saying, we want Carter Center to come in, we want this to be observed.
Well, and the Carter Center, there was a piece of legislation back at last
Yeah.
fall where the National Council approved the Carter Center to come in and review the electoral process. And this is something that we reviewed last week that the Carter Center does.
yeah.
And I believe it's free of charge, correct?
Well, and then
the Carter Center doesn't charge for any of their services. There is kind of a, that's the one thing that when we were speaking about the legislation, that they have a system that they use in a way that they come in, and it's all on their website, like what we spoke about before. But it's not like they come in tomorrow and observe.
Right.
Like it takes a minimum. I think it's like 2 years for them to get consent from the communities involved, and also all of the different political parties to consent to it, and then they come in, and they won't do it if they don't have that consent from the get-go. So it's one of those things where having the Carter Center come in and observe would be great. There's a lot of consent that has to happen, and if we have the election board coming into a Hugh, or was it LNC?
Hugh.
Hugh committee meeting with their representation, that consent might be hard to get.
Yeah.
Because
Right.
if they,
well, and I mean it's all about timing too, and
Yeah,
really who's
yeah.
all for it, because not everybody was for that. The
Right.
former principal chief
Right.
and all of his supporters
Yes.
did not want to see that
Yeah,
happen.
yeah,
They felt that it was a bridging of our sovereignty.
Right.
That to have somebody else come in, look over our elections. To them it seemed like why we need an outsider or anything like that. And then those proponents of it said, what does it hurt?
Yeah.
It doesn't hurt anything. It only allows there to be,
Transparency.
and really a watchdog of the.
Well,
of the,
and one of the other
election.
points that proponents of that piece of legislation brought up was that it's an outside entity, and so it's someone else looking in.
Yeah,
and
they don't really have a dog in the fight.
right.
And you're kidding yourself, or you're living in a fantasy world if you think that tribal elections can't be corrupted, because everybody knows everybody. We're communal people. You can't just have somebody, I don't care what you think about whoever is the head of the election board. That person at Creek Nation is going to know who's running for. She or he are going to know the people running for offices. That's just the way it is, people. So if you, and I'm not saying that leads to corruption. I'm just saying that you can have situations where maybe it's not such a bad idea if somebody else came in and was that third party and just looking over it. I mean, again, not in any way saying that corruption happens or whatever, but just the system. We've talked about in our coverage how it's not so much the people at Creek Nation that lead to problems. It's some of the system and the things that have been put in place and have been approved as policy and the way we do things that have basically put people in position where they don't really even have a choice in some instances.
Well, there's a lot of
Jared
money.
and I have had conversation after conversation about how there are so many things up here that need to be redone as far as the way that the structure of things, it's set up so that things can happen.
Yeah, and there's a lot of money flowing through the government thanks to the casinos and
Right.
everything. So, and anytime you have large sums of money flowing through anything, you're going to have people that are trying to work the system to their advantage.
Right.
Just because that's the way that it works. The
Right.
larger the tribe gets, the more the tribe is going to need to go back and address things in its electoral policy, in its separation of powers,
Yeah.
in its health care and its housing and et cetera, all these different
Yeah.
divisions that provide services to citizens, so that those policies and procedures are kept up to date with the amounts of citizens that are getting services
Right.
and to ensure that those services aren't misappropriated, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So it's a process that's
Yeah.
going to have to accelerate, if anything, the further up we go. So, like our budgets, because the projected gaming revenues for next year are supposed to be 10% to 20% lower than what they are this year. Chief issued the executive order saying we're going to have to do 90% of our budgets as an anticipatory thing for that reduced revenue. But who knows when the bounce back is going to hit from having Margaritaville open, because that's what we're seeing next year is the dent that's going to be caused because we don't have those things open and we're building them. But then there will be, hopefully, you would
An
think,
influx. Cash.
skyrocketing back
Yeah.
up of the money, and it should be higher than the levels before because we have better facilities.
Well, I don't see there being, from what we've seen from the renderings and the scale and really the location and everything like that, I don't think that it doesn't look anyway like Margaritaville, the resort and everything, is going to be something that would not make money. I mean, you know what I mean?
Oh,
I think it's going to make a ton of money, actually.
Yeah,
but
the dent that we're seeing is the standard thing that
Right.
happens when a casino
Yeah.
does a renovation of anything. We've seen it before with smaller casinos. It's just a huge renovation.
And another thing is, too, it's not an inherent thing where it's just a Muskogee Creek Nation issue. We see the same issues at every single tribe.
Yeah.
We see the same, and
The
it's
Cherokee-
almost like color by number.
Yeah.
They've had to deal with,
Yeah.
everybody has to deal with the same thing.
If it'd be interesting to go back to the Cherokee Nation's fiscal budgets through that period where they were constructing the Hard Rock, and see what type of shift they had after the Hard Rock was up and running, because now that's a big revenue generator for
Yeah,
them. The
right.
hotel and everything
Yeah.
is just like huge.
Yeah, and
So-
that's a part of, the whole, new era of the tribes having to have basically a destination spot rather than just a gaming facility. Interesting, I even saw something with, speaking of that, I saw Principal Chief James Floyd on record with talking about how there's plans for land into trust out at the old
At the-
Fountainhead
yes.
area.
And
Eufaula
that-
State Park.
Whether
Every creek, man, woman, and child out there has talked about we need to do something out there at Fountainhead.
Yeah, that
Could this be the
hopefully-
early stages of
Yeah,
that? Who
hopefully
knows?
that'll go forward.
Well,
that
and-
was
and
the
it-
sticking point in the previous.
Right.
That is Ellis's administration was. We were able to purchase a property and get everything cleared.
Yep.
I think they got stuck where they were trying to get the land into trust because of an issue or something with the Corps of Engineers and the lakefront property or something.
All of those trees, really.
Yeah, and
It's
so-
like a certain amount of money per tree from the Corps.
Apparently, we can assume from that statement that Chief's making about the situation now
Yeah.
is that they've worked that out, or they've got something sorted on
Do
that.
you know any more on that?
I don't
the
know
official
any
capacity
more
of
on
those,
that, but
or the context
but
of those statements.
What citizens also need to understand is this may not even be for gaming purposes.
Mhm.
Now we can
Yeah.
put a casino on trust land, and
Right.
that would be one of the ideas. But we also don't pay taxes on trust land.
Mhm.
Yeah,
This land we currently hold is fee land, so
Right.
we pay taxes on the
Yeah.
land.
And it may be nothing more than getting us a little relief there, and that may be something there. But again, never want to speculate. But due to the fact that people do see that and they talk about that and whatnot, even people that have previously ran for chief, it's been a big part of their platform. And so, what do we do with that area? I remember working here under the A.D. Ellis administration. And went out there with Chief Ellis and videoed them literally eating the structure down.
Yeah.
Remember that, Jared?
They destroyed the hotel.
Yeah, the hotel that had stood out there forever, Fountainhead Resort. Now some people even go, well, why do we do that? Why do we just keep it there and build onto it, build in
Right.
addition to it? But, from my greatest recollection to going back, it was kind of a lot of the structure on that property, and they had
that's
cabins,
an issue.
tree houses, things like that had been just ransacked. A lot of them were being used as like drug places, so they had to just tear it out.
Well,
you know
the
what I
hotel
mean?
too. I think your recollection was right, because that's what I remember from that.
Like
situation.
raccoons
There was
running
some
everywhere, like
there
when
was
we
some
were in
structural
there.
problems with the hotel.
Yeah.
that meant that they couldn't salvage the hotel.
Yeah.
And they wanted to also. I think the game plan originally was to make a bigger facility down there that would
Yeah.
be like a companion piece to the golf course, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, you talk about a home run if they were able to pull something off in that area. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't know what the stats are, but there is that location, summertime alone would probably be able to fit the bill for the entire year, and probably be able to fund some programs and be self-sustaining as well. I mean, it'd be interesting to see it all come together.
Yeah, it's a business
E-
opportunity.
Every time I talk to people from down in that area, I'm from Eufaula. Every time I go home, people want to stop me, and they think I know everything about. They're like, "Hey, what's the balance sheet look like this month?" Creek Nation. I'm like, "Hey, I don't know," but all of them go, "Hey, have you heard anything? What they're going to do with Fountainhead? What are they going to do? Are they going to make a big resort
Yeah.
out there and have a huge concert hall and an amphitheater and all this?" And I'm like, I don't know, but those are great ideas. I always just kind of like silently catalog things that these people say, and I'm like, that could be a wonderful
Well, there was
idea.
a big push, when
Yes.
that property was purchased. Like we said, we did several stories on it, and,
Yeah.
and there were several instances of like, we're gonna take this and it's gonna be an economic maneuver that's gonna diversify the tribe, et cetera, et
Yeah.
cetera. And then they ran into that roadblock, and then it just sat for
Yeah.
forever.
Well, and I think the tribe notices that they have a very big asset in their boundary there, the Eufaula Resort area, because we've seen before the council wanting to get involved in the purchase of the Jellystone, the Yogi Bears, little Eufaula RV / beach type of
Right.
summer destination. We were going to get involved in that too, maybe even buy it. So, it's a place that they've had their eye on before.
Right.
I mean, it's be interesting to see where it goes from here. So,
Speaking of Eufaula, we had an
Yes.
email that came out just a little while ago that said that due to the water outage in the city of Eufaula, the Eufaula Indian Health Center will close at 3 o'clock today. So they've been closed for the past hour. Except for pharmacy services, you can still pick up your prescriptions.
George Hollaby's still going to be there with all his good folks getting you your medicine. Don't worry.
It doesn't say anything about tomorrow, so if we have any updates on that, we'll,
Great.
of course, update everyone.
Yeah, keep everyone updated on that as far as what's going on in Eufaula. I saw a recent, one of our very close, speaking of water, one of our very close communities here just down the road, Morris, was hit with they had lead in their water and everything like
Yeah.
that. That's going to be interesting.
That's going to be
Interesting
a
to see.
substantial cost for them, because if it's
Oh my
coming out
gosh.
of the water tower down there.
Yeah,
That water tower's been down in Morris since
That's-
the dawn of time.
since I was born.
I don't know
I
when
mean,
it was built.
You know,
It was
I've known
built
that White Tower,
1970s.
yeah, easily. So it's been there since I was born, and that's 33 years.
You know
so.
what? It might end up happening is the community of Morris might be approaching the tribe, to see if they can help with that, because I don't know where they're going to get the money to do that.
No.
Now Morris has had population expansion,
Mm-hmm.
and there are a lot more people that live in the Morris school system and in that Morris area
Yeah.
that make a lot more money than
Right.
20 years ago,
Yeah.
15 years ago. So
And we have a Creek presence there,
Yeah.
a big JOM department, and also on the school board is James Allred, who is our tribal construction director, and James does a fantastic job. Just won again his election there to the Morris School Board, so congratulations to James on that. But there is, there's a Creek connection there. No way there couldn't be. A lot of our Creek citizens, kids go to that school, live in that community. But these are tough times here, and we've had to say no to things that I never thought would say no to ever. Never, ever in a million years would I think we would say, well, the council house is having some problems structurally. We got to hold off on it. And, I was wondering, I was like, that's something larger. We found out what it was, but at the same time, it's a great point, Jared. They probably will have to look to outside funding, and is it going to be there if they ask us?
When we saw
Who knows?
The walking path that got rebuilt with the Creek Nation's help, did the funding from that come out of Department of Transportation? Wasn't there
I
something?
think it might have been federal.
It
There
was
roads.
some federal money that went
Yeah,
into
if
that.
you
And
go
they might
back
be able to
and-
do a deal like that.
Again, shameless plug, we did a story on the walking trail out at Morrison. If you go back in when it was done, and man, I can never remember dates, but just go back into the online channel, go back to some episodes if you know when that was paved. But I think in those interviews, I don't know if it was the Morris superintendent or the Charlie Lesarge or somebody, but I think it was like it was a joint project, but I think maybe either tribal transportation or federal roads was involved. Definitely federal roads.
Yeah, they might be able to work out some way to do that, because I remember at the time when we covered that story, I was like, that's an innovative way, because that's one of the things that pubbed on that was that this isn't coming out of gaming or any funds out of Creek Nation. This is funds that we have to work with on construction projects, which is a good deal.
Yeah, and a lot of the things that we've had here at the Creek Nation are also sort of another example of that is when we have all the county commissioner luncheons and where they come in and we're working. It's like we're not going to just frivolously just take out of somewhere without trying every avenue. It kind of seems that that's what they do, the county and the state and the tribe. Whenever something falls within our boundaries needs to get done, and we sort of just take a look at it and say, what can you do right now? Thankfully, since we've got all this information out and we're covering all these stories, people have a lot better understanding coming to the table of what Creek Nation actually can do and what they're having to deal with right now. Not to put emphasis on our importance, but at the same time, if we're being recognized or if we're being noted in an outside media agency in Tulsa that says the tribe's media said this or whatever, well, then they're obviously paying attention to the coverage. That tells me then that city councilors in Tulsa, elected officials, are paying attention to the coverage as well. So then you miss out on what happened with us and G.T. Bynum and that whole thing of the, well, they said they might be able to do this, when in actuality is we might need to go talk to them about what they can do. But you see how the coverage changes that, and can maybe make it a little bit easier to get a negotiation rolling and get something done at the back end. So we will continue to cover. That's why we do it, So if you have any questions, of course, send them on in. I did have a question from a citizen that called yesterday, and he was wanting to know about the tags, the car tags, the red Muskogee Creek Nation tags. Recently, Cherokee Nation made it to where you could live anywhere in Oklahoma, have a Cherokee tag. We do not do that. You talked to
Right.
Jerry McPeak about that.
This was a previous interview that we kind of talked to him about, and the difference between our compact for the tags and other nations' compact for the tags.
Right.
So the Cherokee Nation compact, Chickasaw Nation, Choctaw Nation are all different from ours, and they actually get less money per tag than we do. And their tags are also more expensive. I believe they pay full state price, whereas our Muskogee Creek Nation tags are not full price. I believe it's almost half.
Right.
And
Yeah,
so
my understanding of that too is that that's because the other tribal tags are kind of like almost like a vanity plate. You know,
Correct.
like they use they use the state's system.
Ours
and
is
everything.
actually a
Right.
tag
Yeah, it's
agency
actually
Right.
a separate tag
that we
as
bring in
opposed to-
revenue.
exactly.
And we heard from Mr. McPeak actually recently, and when in one of our interviews, you can watch that again on the online channel, that they had a record year. So they're doing pretty well, and they feel pretty comfortable with what they're bringing in and their structure. So I would say I don't see that changing in the immediate future. Down the road, who knows?
Well,
we may
and
open
it
up
would,
and do that.
It would also take a change in our compact. So
Yeah.
not only it
Right.
wouldn't be an immediate decision like by council or chief or the tag agency. This would have to be something that's negotiated with the state of Oklahoma.
Yeah, we can want it all we want as Muskogee Creek Nation, but when you deal with the state, especially with compacts, it's all about give and take, having a little bit of that compromise. And so, the Creek Nation definitely wants to go with a firm hand as far as in those negotiations, but at the same time realize that we can't put everything on hold, stop all progress to be, hard-headed at those tables. And so we're able to work with the state. I think that's why you see a lot of things get done, and that's why, as Mr. McPeak noted as well, we probably got the best tobacco compact that there is. Or he said, what was it? I think he said that it's maybe not the best one ever, but it's the best one in the state of Oklahoma currently, and he feels really strongly about that. He said it a number of times. So, that's the part of the process. You look at that, and that answers the question for our citizen, though, is that currently we do not, if you are outside the boundaries, you cannot purchase a tag. But in the immediate future, no. As for reasons Jessica said, it's all in the compact, and it's all in the dollars and cents right now as far as what it does and what we can do, the Muskogee Creek Nation, with that status of those tags. But like I said, you never say never. Things change up here. Titles change, people change, and so you just go with sort of whatever happens. And the same could be said with the state of Oklahoma. People change at the state of Oklahoma and who we're dealing with. So you just have to take that for what it is and know that just because things are this way right now don't necessarily mean that they'll be that way in the future. But as we talked about, for those reasons, that is the answer to the question, is that no, and probably in the next few years, probably not. So we'll keep you updated on that. I know a lot of people out there, that's fascinating to them to know about why we do certain things. They don't want to just hear, you just can't get a tag just because if you're outside the boundaries. No, there's compact issues, things like that we delve into. That's kind of our job. So we love doing it. Not necessarily. Come on, you don't like doing it. I go by your
If you
door
have a Cherokee tag
every
or
day.
another tribal tag, if you move out of the state of Oklahoma, then you
Right.
have to get a tag through that state's agency.
Right.
So
Yeah,
it
you
doesn't
can't.
cover the whole United States.
No,
It's
just Oklahoma.
basically like an Oklahoma tag.
Yeah,
is
yeah.
what it is.
Yeah.
And if citizens have any questions, they can call us and we'll do
Yeah.
the research for you. We're also going to take questions for those citizens who are curious about the health deficit.
Yeah.
If there's anything that you want to know, the budget and the audits are available on our website. We've showed you in previous episodes how to get to that. So look through those, and if you have questions, send them to Jared. I believe his email is up on the screen right now. It is jmoore@muskogeemedia.com,
Yeah.
and we'll be happy to look into it for
Yeah,
you.
or he will. I'm not looking into it. They just wake me up at 3 every day and roll me in here. I don't do anything.
What else do we have, guys?
What's going on?
One more brief update. In the Muskogee Nation News, April 1st edition, we alerted citizens to a proposed law changing the construction requirements in the state of Georgia. Now, this would mean that on state funded projects. Has nothing to do with federal funding or federal land or anything like that. It's state funded projects. It would change the way they notify us to where they wouldn't have to notify us of a project. This has since passed through the House and the Senate and is currently on the Georgia governor's desk to be signed. The National Council last night in their LNC meeting discussed it and passed legislation through committee to send a notice to the governor saying, please veto it.
Right.
So we'll keep citizens updated on that. That is to go before the full council here at the end of the month.
Right. And really, Raylyn Butler, who's the interim manager over at Tribal Historic Preservation here at Creek Nation, Cultural Preservation, said that they strongly oppose the bill, and it'll affect Indian country everywhere, not just there in Georgia. I think this is something that probably Georgia needs to listen to. Some of the times, you have things happen in other states where it really just affects your state. It's not really broad-reaching. I think this is not the case in this instance. I mean, I think she's right. I think that it affects a lot of people. It affects a lot of places. It reaches out. And I think there's strong opposition nationally. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
There's not just, like, the Creek Nation isn't just affected by federal laws and things on the federal level.
Yes.
We're also affected by the state of Oklahoma and then all of the states from the original homelands as well as the Trail of Tears. So the state of Georgia, Alabama, Florida, Tennessee, North Carolina, and all the states all the way to Oklahoma. Yeah. Those state laws can affect us.
Well, we've seen with the Porch Band and the Creek Nation having the quarrel about the Wind River Resort being on Ogiabova. We've seen how, removal doesn't really, just you're there now and that's where your home is. And there are things that have been done in Georgia and Alabama by creeks that can never be undone, pulled up, covered, and so it takes on a whole new meaning when you talk about that. And people from here that brought those fires from here, and it's just, there's so many layers to it that you can't really explain to people that don't know. And I would imagine that Georgia legislators don't have any idea what I'm talking about. But this is why you don't just pass a bill or something. You bring in cultural preservation people. You bring in people from the Creek Nation. You bring ceremonial people that have a vested in the dirt, interest and in the soil actually, and in the trees, everything there, nature, so big to our people to basically say, hey, it's not just about this little bill that you're going to forget about in 20 minutes. It's our entire life. It's our entire peoplehood, so deal with a lot of things there.
Just for clarification on what they're changing in the Georgia bill, right? So
right. Just be able...
Georgia bill, right, before this gets signed, says that if they're conducting a construction project and they come across what they believe to be remains or whatever, they're supposed to contact the University of Georgia, and the University of Georgia sends in people to evaluate the scene, and if possible, collect whatever archaeological artifacts that are there on that scene. Now, the cultural preservation people would get involved after that fact to petition the Georgia University to get those artifacts back from them, and the notifications and all those things would happen at that time. So that's what's going to be removed, along with the EPA scans and the environmental impacts reviews and things like that would happen on these types of road projects. And I can make a prediction now, and we'll see what happens in the future, but if the governor of Georgia signs this, I think what we're going to see is federal lawsuits come out, not only from the Native American artifacts or any artifacts situation, but also from the EPA situation, because what you're going to have is a landowner whose water gets contaminated, or you're going to have a tribal entity that finds out after the fact that there were artifacts that got paved over or whatever, and there'll be a federal lawsuit on that, and then Georgia will have to go back and re-look at their situation, because the feds are typically, in those instances, going to rule on the side of whatever the federal regulation is as opposed to the states' rights regulation, because the states' rights side of it is not going to be able to reasonably justify the time savings or the cost savings that they would get by omitting these surveys that they had been conducting, because the court's going to say, well, you guys have been conducting these surveys for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, and all of a sudden now you're saying we don't need to do those anymore. And it's causing problems because now people are going to sue you. And I think that's, from the tribal aspect, what we've seen is the council and the chief executive branch are not letting this issue go in Georgia, so they're going to just wait. You know, and hopefully if some instance comes up, we can conduct a lawsuit in federal court and shut those guys down, and they can readdress their policies.
It's also, if you're interested in hearing about that, they discuss it at length in the LNC audio on the National Council website that we referenced before.
Yeah, it's something that's been a big deal here, not just in Georgia. So that's clear evidence of what we were saying earlier about how it's a national issue. Well, that's all we have. Everything for today with Indian Time. We hope that you enjoyed hanging out with Jessica and I this afternoon, and Jared off camera. We like to bring everything to you in the afternoon, so we have a chance to see what all's going on throughout the day and everybody. We know it's a hard time, 3:30. You kind of hit that wall, So it's nice to break that up with something to be able to watch and to get information. So that's part of our motivation for doing this, and so we'll continue to do it. We want to thank, like I said, Jared here for controlling the stream, also Josh getting everything ready on the post end, and everybody here at Muskogee Media for gathering information today and doing a good job on this Tuesday. Please come see us sometime, or check in with us on our online channel.
And our previous streams are archived on the online channel too, so if you want to catch a previous day's stream or get caught up, you can always go to our YouTube channel and see every daily stream up until now. Absolutely.
You don't have to miss us ever, and you can have it on demand. That's a great, right? They just love us. You can have it on demand when you watch it when it's most convenient for you. When the kids are in bed, if you want to check out what happened at Creek Nation today, it's a great resource. So thanks, Jessica, for being with me. Jason Salzman here. We'll see you guys next time. This has been Indian Time on MuskogeeMedia.com.